Have you ever had the scenario where you have presented a really solid, exciting solution to a problem or to a potential gain within your business, and it just it just doesn't land with your audience, and then somebody else presents a pretty lackluster idea but with real gravitas? They present it really with such executive presence that everyone in the room gets excited, and you're left sitting there thinking, really? We're doing that? The chances are, if that's the case, if that has happened to you, or you recognize that in any way possible, then the chances are that you're not fully embracing your executive presence. Now, executive presence is one of those things that I know gets kind of bandied around a lot, and it is pretty hard to define. But I look at it in terms of communication, because that's my area of expertise, that's my jam, and that's where I feel I'm able to add value. So if we look at what executive presence is in terms of communication, then we can start to bring that into that presentation of those ideas or that solution, even in a team meeting. It doesn't need to be as formal as a presentation. It could just be brainstorming within a team meeting to say, listen, we need to sort this out. What do we think? If you can present that idea in that moment using executive presence, there's a much, much greater chance of it landing. Because leadership is this really interesting combination. As far as I'm concerned, it's about the image that you create and the actions that you take that together combined create the perception of you as a leader. So it's the image and the actions that you do that create the perception of you as a leader. And we want to try and create that perception of you as a leader as consistently and as uniformly as possible. So we want to be using executive presence in as many places as possible. So what do I mean by image? Well, I certainly don't mean the suit that you're wearing, or the shoes, or the watch, or how you have your haircut, or any of those kinds of things. The image is more to do with the energy that you bring to these situations, to all situations. What is it you're bringing? Is it decisiveness? Is it creativity? Is it inclusivity? And that might change depending on the situation. But being really clear about what you're bringing and what you can consistently bring that feels authentic to you, that doesn't feel like a mask, that's what I mean by image. So that when you ask that group of people, oh, what's Emma like? They'll give a consistent idea, maybe slightly different words, but they'll give a consistent idea about who you are. It makes you much more easy to give projects to, much more easy to promote, much more easy to be front of mind when opportunities come up, when there is consistency across a group of people. The other thing is about the action. So what are you doing and how are you doing those things? And that creates this perception. Those two things combined, how you show up energetically and what you're doing, create this perception of you. So we want that perception to be as consistent as possible, because if you think about it, all those important decisions that are ever made about you, your promotions, your pay rises, opportunities for different projects, opportunities to change team, whatever it might be, they are all made behind closed doors. So you need to be in a position where you can influence when you're not in the room. And that consistency of how you show up is really important in that, because we want everyone in that room saying, yes, they're a good person. Yes, they definitely should be being promoted and pushed forward. So we want that consistency. So if we move on to this idea of executive presence, this ability to really step into your expertise, own your expertise, and have it show up every time you communicate with people within your organization. And this is why it needs to be authentic, because you can't just switch it on and switch it off. It has to be all the time. So you can't feel like you're masking, that you're wearing a mask and pretending to be that person. So what is executive presence in those terms? What does it look like? Well, I've got a model that I generally only share with clients, but I've been thinking about this, and I'm running a challenge at the moment around stepping into your executive presence. And we've been using this model, and I thought, it's such a good model, I want to share it with more people. So you're getting a little sneaky peek behind the curtains. So I'm going to show you the model so you can see what we've been talking about. And I'm going to talk you through the model. And so you can start to see where you are doing this in life already at work, where you're doing it outside of life as well. So let's just have a look at that. Let me share my screen with you. Okay, I need to reload my page. This is always so I'm really very bad at this. So if anyone can teach me how to drive a computer and share content at the same time, I would absolutely love that. Because I'm really, really bad at it. I can't talk and drive the computer at the same time and keep talking about the thing that I'm meant to be talking about. It is not letting me share. Okay, why is that? Okay, so we're going to run with the fact that the tech is not playing ball at the moment. And that's absolutely fine. And actually, this is a really good in-life lesson of when these things happen, when tech doesn't work, when situations change, when timings change, being able to just kind of roll with it in that moment and say, okay, well, this is the reality of now, is really, really effective, because how you behave will dictate to your audience how they behave. So if you become flustered, they will start to be anxious on your behalf. They will start to clock watch. They will start to think, oh gosh, God, what's going to happen? Whereas if you're like, hey, it's not working. Okay, this is what we're going to do instead. Then they will roll with it. As long as you're comfortable, they will be comfortable, because they mirror the energy that you bring. So going back to that idea of leadership and the image, the energy that you bring to that scenario, whatever you're bringing will be reflected back to you. So we want to be bringing the most positive, the most productive energy for that particular scenario as often as possible. So I'm going to describe verbally to you what the model looks like. So I want you to imagine a bar, just a straight bar, almost like a seesaw. So here we have our plank for the seesaw. And above the seesaw, we've got 3 blocks or 3 circles. So the first circle is gravitas. And gravitas is a really important part of the executive presence equation. Gravitas is the ability to hold the space. Gravitas is saying, I've got this, I've got you, I've got the problem, we're all okay. It's about leaning into your expertise and knowing that you don't know all the answers. You really don't, and that's absolutely okay. But you do know the right questions to ask. You do know the right people to go to. You do know how to draw people out so that the solution is in the room and you will find the solution together. It isn't your job to know everything. It is your job to know who does know and how to augment the best solution or the best scenario possible. So gravitas is that part. It's really being able to lean into that. It's also part of not needing to talk all the time. So gravitas can come from being quiet, by asking the right questions, allowing the conversation to develop, absorbing what's going on, synthesizing it, distilling it down and going, okay, right, this is where I think we are as a team. This is my understanding. This is where, perhaps we need a little bit more thought. There's a gap in our understanding here. So there's an important part of gravitas. One is like knowing when to speak up and how to ask those right questions, and doing it unapologetically and saying, okay, this is me. This is what we need to do now. This is what I think. This is where I'm putting my flag in the sand. And there's also the other side of it, which is saying, listen, I'm going to listen. You've got some great ideas. I'm going to pull on you. I'm letting you shine now. I'm going to support you. I'm here to help you step up, and being quiet in those moments when it's necessary, thinking and synthesizing the information. And that will play out. If you have that secure in your mind, that will play out in your body language. It will play out in your gesture. It will play out in your tone of voice. So gravitas is not about being serious, but it is about really owning your leadership space and really owning what you know and what you can do and your ability to lead that team. And it's showing up in your body language and your gestures. Now, on the other side of the seesaw, so we've got gravitas on this side of the seesaw, very, very important. So we don't want apologetic leadership. On the other side of the seesaw, we've got another circle, and that circle is levity or lightness. So this is the ability, the skill, the mindset to be able to take the work seriously, to know that what you're doing is really, really important. But you don't take yourself too seriously. Because if you take yourself too seriously, that gravitas bubble on the other side starts to become a bit too heavy. And we sort of drop down into the taking yourself super seriously and not bringing any lightness, not bringing any fun, not bringing any silliness to the situations, not laughing at yourself or just taking yourself lightly when things go wrong. And if we don't have enough levity, if we don't have enough excitement or passion, we just become quite somber and quite serious. And it isn't the best way to lead people. Now, equally, we don't want too much levity. We don't want too much excitement, too much enthusiasm, too much up energy, because that feels very unsettling for the people that we're leading. It can feel a little bit untethered if we're not careful. So we do want to have some lightness, and we do want to have the gravitas. If you think about any great film, book, play, they have both light and dark. They have their serious moments and they have their lightness. That is what great leadership looks like, that balance between the light and the dark, the balance between the serious and the absolute owning of expertise and the lightness of, it's fine, we can deal with this, it's no problem. I've got this, I'm not taking myself too seriously, but we take the work very seriously. So we need that lovely balance between the two things. And if we've got balance between those two things, then the third thing that sits on the top of this seesaw almost inevitably arises. When we don't have balance between the gravitas and the levity, this third bubble tends not to exist. And that is about having grace under fire. So when things do go wrong, and they will go wrong because we live in a human world with humans and things just don't go as we planned. So when things do go wrong, it's about stepping into that executive presence, really fully embracing it and having grace under fire and understanding the situation as quickly as possible. But more than that, understanding what fears are going on in the group, what anxieties are there in this group of people, and how can you listen to those and how can you allay them and still make good decisions, take hold of that captaincy which might be needed in that moment. You're probably going to need to collaborate to get an idea of what can be done, what is possible. But then there's a moment of taking on that captaincy, and that is really having that grace under fire. So holding the situation, holding the people, seeing them, reflecting back to them what you're seeing and hearing, reassuring them that you are going to help navigate this scenario, and then making the decisions to make that happen. That is that piece of grace under fire. So those are the three things that fit on the top of our seesaw. And you can see we want a nice balance of the gravitas, the levity. And if we have both of those, we can create this sense of grace under fire. Now, they all sit on this bar above a circle below. And in that circle below is high quality communication. Because everything above the bar is predicated on you being able to communicate your ideas. So you might have an incredible vision. You might have such excitement, such passion for what you can create or what you believe the team can create or what this organization can do, the impact it's going to have, the ripples it's going to create. So you could have all of that. But if you can't get it from here and distill it into really high quality communication, it isn't going to have the impact you want. If you become very good at being quiet and still and holding the space, but then can't communicate what you've heard, the image of you is somebody who's very reserved and interior. So we need to be able to really highly communicate with high quality what is going on, what we see, what we hear, what we feel, what we think might be possible, the right questions. Without that really high quality communication, the rest of it becomes it's good, but it'll never be great. It's functional, but it'll never be inspirational. And obviously as a leader, we want to move into that inspirational piece. So that high quality communication is so, so important, because if you think about it, that high quality communication is what creates your relationships with people. So relationships with your peers, your team, your higher up, strategic partners, clients, whatever it might be, that creates the relationships. And it is only through really good quality relationships that you're going to get results. Now, you can get results without those relationships, but I've never known an organisation, I've never known an individual where that is sustainable. It's short term, it's usually quite impressive, but there's a huge amount of churn and chaos going on behind that success, which can be highly stressful for people involved. Where it's sustainable, where that growth, where that impact, where those ripples are really quite incredible, is when we have both the relationships that create the results, not just the results by themselves. Now, equally, we don't want just really wonderful, warm relationships without the results, because that is a lovely place to work, but there's no impact. So there's too much focus on the levity communication and not enough focus on the gravity communication, the gravitas communication. So can you see how this seesaw is going to tip depending on the quality and the style and the energy of the communication that you're bringing to each of these scenarios? So I hope that you can see why stepping into executive presence is really, really important, and also what that might look like and how in your communication it's balanced or unbalanced. So really understanding what executive presence can do for you, really having a kind of clear idea of where you are highly skilled in your executive presence, where you're using it effectively and where you're not yet using it but could be using it in the future, is really going to be the next step to elevating your ability as a communicator, as a speaker, as a leader, as someone that could potentially be elevated within an organisation, or perhaps drawing in investment if you are an entrepreneur. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about executive presence, we have a challenge that we're running. You're very welcome to come and join the challenge. The link is in the description below. You are also very welcome to book a session with me so that we can talk about where your executive presence is showing up, what you're doing, and how that's really making the right kinds of impressions in your organisation, and where it isn't, where you feel you're kind of, well, one of my clients described it the other day, it's like running through treacle. It's like, I'm just not getting the impact. I'm not creating the ripples. I'm not creating the sort of rapport that I really want to be creating in order to get where I want to go. So if you are feeling like that, book a client call in. I'd be very happy to have a conversation with you about what's going on. We can brainstorm together about where you might be able to tweak what you're doing, pivot some of your skills that you already have and start using them in some of these sticky places, if you like. So I trust that you have found today's session really, really useful. Please do subscribe, press that bell button. We upload videos every week and we really aim to make them valuable and useful for you. Take care. Have a fabulous week. Bye now.